Hello, parishioners. It is day 92 of the Bible in a Year, and we're at Judges chapters 9 through 11. And here again we have, prophecies and foreshadowings of Christ in the sense that the word Christ means king, anointed. That's what they did. They anointed someone as king instead of crowning a king. And so whenever you have words about kings, you got to think of Christ, because eventually God gave in and let the people start having kings. Because at first, when they were going through the desert, God was their king, and they were not supposed to have a king. And in fact, Gideon expresses that in chapter 8, verse 23. They ask him, rule over us, and he says, I will not rule over you. And my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. So he's kind of saying to his 70 sons, don't get any ideas, because we're not supposed to be kings. We're leaders, but we're not king. God is the king. And so that's what's kind of ironic about this fact, that he had one son from his concubine, basically not from one of his wives. He had a son. Besides his 70 real sons, he had this sort of illegitimate son. And that one, Abimelech, he kills all the other ones and wants to become king, even though he's, the son of a kind of a harlot or a concubine. And so he wants to establish himself as a king. And he gets this name Abimelech, which is kind of ironic, because the word Abimelech in Hebrew means, my father is king. So that's kind of strange, because his father, Gideon, had said, I don't want to be king. I'm not king, and my sons aren't going to be kings. But Abimelech, his name means, my father is king. And so that's kind of tragically ironic, apparently. And so... But this Abimelech, he takes power by killing almost all of those 70 of his brothers. One of them, named Jotham, was the youngest, and he escaped. He's the one who stood on a hill and yelled out to Abimelech this parable, this little story about all of these plants or trees that are asked to be king, and they all refused. Why should I? The olive tree says, give up my rich fatness, my olive oil, by which God and men are honored. And the fig tree, why should I give up my sweetness? And the vine, the grapevine says, why should I give up my wine that cheers gods and men and go and rule over the trees, or the Israelites? And so these are kind of interesting little things, saying that, a king is kind of like these different trees. And I think all of these are symbols of Christ, because when you think about it, Jesus is the true wine. He is the new wine, and Jesus is he is the anointed one, anointed with olive oil, and he suffered and sweated blood in Gethsemane, which means wine pressed. He was crushed by our offenses and sins, and sweated blood in Gethsemane. And so Jesus Christ is the king, and all of these little trees in this parable kind of are symbols of Christ, the true king. But then bad old Abimelech, he gets his just deserts. He gets his punishment. In chapter 9, verse 22, it says something strange. God sent an evil spirit. And basically he allowed, that's what we would say, God by his permissive will allowed evil spirits to go and to freely do their work of causing division. That's what the word devil means, divide. Division between Abimelech and some of his subjects, the men of Shechem particularly, this one city that eventually starts to rebel against Abimelech, and he's eventually killed. And so this is an example of God using the devil, or using demons to accomplish his purpose. He allows the devil. So why does God allow the devil to keep tempting us? It's to make us tougher and stronger, so somehow everything is for the best of all possible worlds. Our God knows what he's doing, and if he allows the devil to do things, it's so that the devil can eventually be conquered, actually. Then it's kind of interesting how Abimelech meets his match. He's killed by a woman, which is kind of embarrassing. In fact, a woman from the walls of the tower throws an upper millstone, which basically there was like a circular round stone for grinding grain, and on top of it there would be another stone which was used to, rub or turn over the bottom one so that it crushed the grain that was in between. I recall that in Knight's Ferry, there's here in California near our Diocese of Stockton, there's a place that's a water mill right by the covered bridge, the longest one west of the Mississippi, and there's an example right out there in the open. There's a grinding stone that was used, turned by the water to grind grain, and so that was similar to what they had back then. But the upper stone, the top part, I guess you could take it off and you could toss it, and it crushed the head of Abimelech. It crushed his skull there in verse 53, and of course that's a symbol of the power of God using a woman to crush the head of the serpent. Of course, Our Lady, and our Lord, crushed the head of the devil. And that was predicted when God spoke to Eve. And here we have the fact that it's also very similar to what happened in chapters 4 and 5 when Jael, she crushed or put a spike through the head of Sisera when he was, hiding in a carpet in her house. And that's another example of how Our Lady is like that crushing the head of the serpent. In chapters 10 and 11, we have the story of Jephthah, which it's true. He's kind of an outcast because he was kind of a boy named Sue. He was rejected by his family, and so he became an orphan and kind of ran away and became this tough kind of outlaw gang leader sort of thing. And but then when times get tough and they have enemies, they go to him because they need him to lead their military. And he's a great military man and a great diplomat. And in fact, he negotiates quite well in chapter 11, verses 15 to 27. He gives a long address or speech, defending Israel, saying that Israel didn't do anything illegal, that everything was done correctly, and Israel has legitimate rights to this land, and so he's a diplomat. But he's also not perfect. The judges were not always perfect, and again, he made that vow, which was kind of rash, that whoever comes in verse 31 of chapter 11, whoever comes out of the door, I will offer as a burnt offering. Now, that's something that was against the law of Israel. The other nations would do human sacrifice, but Israel was not allowed to. So that's the usual interpretation. There's some commentators of the Bible, as it says here in my Ignatius Study Bible. There's a footnote that's very interesting that some say that the word burnt offering was used as a sort of a symbolic, metaphorical expression for if you offered your daughter to be like a nun, to be sacrificed and not to be able to marry. And so she would kind of offer herself up as to the Lord. And so there's many, as it points out here in the Old Testament, there's little indications that it was true that in the temple, in the sanctuary at Shiloh, there were women who would dedicate themselves. And so perhaps that's why she was mourning her virginity rather than mourning her death there. And so This is a possible interpretation of that passage.